Okay, good afternoon. So I'm assuming that you're able to see my screen.
Looks good.
Looks good.
Good. And we said we would introduce ourselves, so I'll go ahead and start. You have here Christine Koeller. I've been with the Wisconsin Department of Transportation for about 1.5 years. And Adam and Tony are going to introduce themselves as well, but we all work together on a team called GIS Core Services. So we're primarily responsible for the administration and architecture of all of our enterprise GIS technologies at DOT. And I will let Adam introduce himself.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me? Anyone hear me, Christine?
You're coming in a little bit quiet.
A little quiet. Just want to check here. Well, I'm gonna introduce myself. I'll try to talk loud, but then I'm gonna switch over my headphones when Christine starts to present. But my name is Adam Feidt. I am the enterprise architect at the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. I've worked for WisDOT since 2013. Previously, I was the infrastructure specialist, and more recently, I am working in the position of enterprise architect. So go ahead, Tony.
Hello, everybody. Tony Vanderwillen. I'm the new kid on the block here at GIS Core. So I am the infrastructure specialist and formerly with LTSB for many years and former WLA board member. So it's good to be back and looking forward to see everybody in person sometime soon.
Me too, thank you. So I'll kick us off this afternoon, and I have some fun interactive pieces of the presentation. But just for those of you that are not as familiar with the Department of Transportation's GIS presence, we have over 3,500 employees throughout the agency. That is permanent staff. That doesn't necessarily include all of the contractors and consultants that also work at the department. And of those employees, we have over 400 staff that use desktop GIS tools, whether it's ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro. We are an Esri shop, and so all of our enterprise architecture and software components are Esri technologies. So you can see in our organizational chart here that we are split into 6 different divisions. And at least 5 of these divisions have a pretty strong GIS presence. The team you're speaking with today is within the Bureau of Information Technology Services. So our bureau is part of the Division of Business Management. And we have 3 team members here, but we are a team of 5. We're hoping to be a team of 6 soon. We'll see if that works out. And we're really the administrators for all of our enterprise technologies. So we really service all of the other divisions and GIS staff at the department. So we're here today to talk about our deployment of ArcGIS Enterprise. And if you're not familiar with ArcGIS Enterprise, you should know that there's 4 software components. There's ArcGIS Server, Portal for ArcGIS, which is really the mechanism for creating and sharing and managing web services content, and then the ArcGIS Data Store and the Web Adapter. What we're primarily going to focus on today is our Portal for ArcGIS implementation. But as you'll see when we go through the presentation, Adam's going to talk about the architecture and he'll talk about some of the other software components as well. So one of the questions that kept coming up as we were doing this project was, why are we implementing Portal for ArcGIS? What are the business needs? We already use ArcGIS Online. We have a strong ArcGIS Online presence in our organization. We have several hundred staff members that are part of our ArcGIS Online organization. And we had a lot of questions around what are going to be the benefits of doing a local portal for ArcGIS deployment. So really the first benefit is all of our infrastructure on the portal is now in-house. So we have local servers that are administering the web services, and we have control over those, which allows us to better secure all of our GIS web content. So feature layers, web maps, and applications are more secured. We also have some cost savings that we've recognized. So those of you that are familiar with ArcGIS Online, the way that administration and licensing works, every person in your organization that you want to have a viewer account needs to get an annual licensed viewer account. So that can get quite expensive. If you have an application that's not going to go public, it's going to remain within the organization, and that application has hundreds of users, now you need hundreds of viewer accounts to accommodate those staff members. And then using our internal infrastructure, we eliminate the spending of what we refer to as, of what you all know as ArcGIS Online credits. So because you're running it on your local architecture, you no longer need those credits. We can also control the upgrade schedule. So ArcGIS Online has quarterly updates. We typically, when those quarterly updates come out, we announce it to our business areas and we encourage them to test their applications. With our internal infrastructure, we're going to have more control over when we decide to upgrade, and we'll be able to make sure that everybody can come along when we make any kind of upgrades or enhancements. One thing that the business area really wanted to see within DOT was the ability to do automatic sign-on. So in our portal for ArcGIS, which hopefully you'll see in the demo if we have time to do it, when our users are logged into their workstations with their Active Directory credentials, they automatically get signed into our portal when they hit our homepage. So that was huge for us. And then we also had the ability to customize widgets and applications. This is something that we were not able to do as well in ArcGIS Online. And I just want to highlight or point out that our portal for ArcGIS deployment is not replacing our AGO organizational account. This is really going to be a complement to our ArcGIS Online environment, and there's really a need at our agency to have both deployments available. So when we talk to the business, we kind of show them side by side. Here's what our portal looks like. We branded it at DOT as Geoportal Wisconsin. It's all internal, so that's how we've branded it versus ArcGIS Online. So again, we have the local servers for Geoportal. They don't scale like the Esri servers do, but they do provide that local control. The sharing levels are the same, with the exception that AGO allows our staff to share content publicly. With Geoportal, we get unlimited free viewer accounts. So anybody in the agency with a DOT login can hit our system and start viewing content that's been shared. It's secured. So our users have to be connected to our intranet. We use primarily VPN connection to do that. Whereas AGO is available on the internet, there still is a staff sign-in for it though. So we do have some content in our AGO organization that is limited to staff access. And then as we mentioned, we can customize additional widgets and applications. And then the other really big piece of having our local infrastructure is we were able to build non-production environments where we can do research and development and testing before we go to production, and allows us to have some backup content. And then as we mentioned, the controlled updates. If users do want to share their content either agency-wide or publicly, we do have a review and approval process that content goes through before it gets shared as well. So with that, I will turn it back over to our architect, our
Hello? I think I lost Christine. Is there anyone else there?
You are correct. We lost Christine.
Okay. So I think she was trying to hand it off to me. So I'm assuming my sound is a little bit better now, but we lost the presentation.
On the bright side, you do sound great, Adam.
Awesome. So we fixed one issue, but ran into another, which is kind of the risk with doing virtual.
And worst comes to worst, if you're buried, we could pull up our slide as long as you can put up with lots of saying, next slide, please.
That's fine with me if we want to move on. I don't know when she'll be able to get back on. Oh, here she comes.
It looks like she's trying.
She's coming back on.
Hold on, can you hear me?
There she
We can-
is.
You can hear me,
Hi,
but you're
Christine.
not. Are you seeing my screen sharing? When did I drop off? That's unfortunate.
Right when you were handing it off, so I think we're good.
Oh, good. Okay.
All right. So, hi, my name is Adam. Like we had mentioned before, I just want to cover briefly the design, the planning, and implementation of the kind of the technical infrastructure behind our portal implementation at WisDOT. And the first thing I want to stress, and I can't stress this enough, is to be prepared. Read, research, learn as much as you can about ArcGIS Enterprise. Esri provides a lot of information online for anyone to get caught up to speed with what ArcGIS Enterprise is, how the components relate to each other, and what are the best practices for implementing the infrastructure. Specifically, there were 3 resources that I used to help guide me through designing our infrastructure. And the highlighted document or hyperlink there, Architecting the ArcGIS Platform Best Practices, is one of the more integral pieces of documents that I read that is really crucial to your deployment. I read this thing top to bottom multiple times so that I understood every piece of it, and it's really well written, and it's really great information for designing and implementing ArcGIS Enterprise. I took 2 Esri training classes, ArcGIS Enterprise Configuring Base Deployments and Advanced Workflows, which gave me a lot more knowledge. They're sort of expensive classes, but well worth the money if you're trying to deploy enterprise-wide ArcGIS Enterprise and Portal. We wanted to do things a little bit differently when designing this project. In the past, we kind of took the approach of in 2013, I came in, we had infrastructure, and we kind of drug that infrastructure along through upgrades and just kind of built things out so that we were confident that it could support the number of services that we had and the number of applications we had. And we want to do things a little bit differently in this project. And we really wanted to let the architectural best practices that Esri gave us and our business needs drive our infrastructure. And it took a lot of understanding of the base components and the recommended infrastructure to come up with that plan. The other thing that's really important when designing ArcGIS Enterprise is understanding your licensing and how you can align those business needs with the licensing that you have, and how that licensing relates to extending the capabilities of ArcGIS Enterprise. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the base deployment, which comes kind of right out of the box that you have to have for a portal in ArcGIS Enterprise. And then to extend it, what do you need to do? You need to kind of hang off these individual licenses in ArcGIS server sites to increase the capability, and it really separates out your processing into different sites so that you have the support of multiple servers. Once we had done enough research and background information, we started kind of designing different plans that we thought fit with our organization. We knew at the base that ArcGIS Server was going to be the engine behind both our existing application services that we use for custom development and our future Geoportal that we're going to deploy. We knew we were going to be limited in how much we could increase our licensing. We knew that we had already deployed ArcGIS Online as an organization, and that was going to be the public exposure to ArcGIS Online, and our future public exposure for open data projects and things like that would also play a role in how we were going to design our infrastructure. And then security. We knew security was going to be a very important aspect of this project. If you look at where we were coming from, on the left-hand side, we had 3 sites there, but 2 dual server sites. We had a little bit of workload separation already with map servers and image servers and geoprocessing server sites, and then we had the geocoding server sites. But really what we wanted to do is leverage those licensing to spread out our services across, 5 or 6 individual servers that supported different workloads. So there's going to be a hosted server, there's going to be a map visualization server, there's going to be an image server, geoprocessing server, that kind of thing. And then also, what were we going to do with our public access services? In our old infrastructure, we exposed individual services to the internet. We wanted a different approach moving forward. We came up with 4 plans. You kind of see the names. I'm not going to go into them all, and we definitely settled on one of them moving forward. Once we had the plans, we wanted to do a little bit of cost analysis on each of the plans, which took into account the project costs, and then projected server licensing and development costs over 5 years. I mean, you can see right away one of the plans really stands out, right? And it kind of eliminated itself based on cost. That dual plan kind of was to support both the Geoportal infrastructure and custom ArcGIS services or development infrastructure, which would have been our old infrastructure. It really wasn't economical to support both sets of infrastructure into the future. So we kind of knew right away that wasn't an option. The other 3 plans kind of grouped together fairly closely. Some had higher project costs and lower future costs or costs over the course of 5 years. The hybrid cost really was a little bit more expensive, and it also didn't really provide us with the business requirements that we wanted to implement in Portal. So we ended up eliminating that one and getting it down to some kind of integrated plan, which we would have the same set of ArcGIS server services supporting both Geoportal and our custom development or existing applications. And we finally decided on the green option, which was a bit more expensive over 5 years, but it included a separate site for public access. So instead of exposing individual services from our internal infrastructure, we were going to deploy a separate ArcGIS server site, which fed ArcGIS Online, which fed some of our vendor applications that needed access to enterprise services and things like that. Once we had decided on a plan, we just set out to deploy a base deployment. We use ArcGIS Enterprise Builder to install ArcGIS Enterprise on a single server over there on the right. Includes web adapter, portal, hosted server, and the data store all on one machine. I think we recycled an old R&D machine that we had up that was set for decommission and used it just to kind of learn the basics of the configuration and understand the components. From there, we kind of set out to put in an environment, a research and development environment, so that people could start gaining access to it outside of GIS core services that kind of had the footprints of our final plan, right? And so now you're kind of starting to see our federated servers, our 4 federated servers at this point, web adapter servers, our portal server, data store server, how it all connects and how the users access the system. And we were able to allow a few developers into the system to start looking at the best practices in staging services, doing portal development, working with a little bit with security and how we'd want to authenticate to the system. And then it allowed us to do proof of concepts and demos for management. Once we were pretty confident that we were going in the right direction, we started setting out to deploy our non-production environments. We're a 3-tiered environment here at WisDOT. We have system test, user acceptance, and production. So we set out to deploy system tests. Once we had that deployed, and you'll see the infrastructure in the next slide, I couldn't fit it all on here, but right out of the bat, we wanted to do basic functional testing, make sure that the infrastructure was configured correctly and working properly. We really started defining the firewall rules now to gain access for more for more users and developers. we're going to start integrating our applications. So now at the system test level, all of our developers are working to migrate those existing applications to use that new infrastructure, to make sure that they can handle the security system, to make sure that they can deploy the services how they need to, using the new technology that we had. GIS Core Services as a group started working on governance, policies, procedures, and guidelines that would outline the Geoportal system. We wanted to start defining that staging process. Obviously, we had to get to the next environment at some point. We wanted to make sure we were clear on how we would start moving services from one environment to the other, how we would move applications from one environment to the other. And then we really wanted to have a really good grasp on our security. And like Christine mentioned, one of our business requirements was a seamless access into Geoportal and applications. And we were coming from a infrastructure that was completely anonymous. Most of our services were unsecured. So if it was internal to DOT, anyone could have access to it, to a system that where everyone was internally was going to start using portal security. We were going to use Active Directory. We found out that Active Directory was best, so that users could just authenticate using automatic sign-on with integrated Windows authentication. So when a user hits the system for the first time, they're automatically authenticated to the system. If they don't have an account, automatic account creation creates an account for them. It's really seamless, and it allows us to track moving forward into the future who's using what services and how often. So it was really beneficial. Once we were comfortable in system test and we had the sign off of all the developers that they were comfortable with the direction that we're going, we propped up the next environment, which was user acceptance testing. This environment really mimics our production environment very closely as far as resources, server resources. It really had to withstand what we thought we were going to put on it in production. But our goals, again, basic functional testing. It had to pass a set of basic functional tests for Geoportal and ArcGIS server. This is where we now get business users to start working with the applications and testing the applications to make sure that the functionality in their applications were sound and that performance was good. We continued to finalize governance. We finalized those staging procedures so that we're ready to start moving people to production when we needed to. Load testing, we started doing research on requests and load and services to make sure that the infrastructure can withstand what we were going to put on it. And Tony's going to talk about that in a little bit down the road here. And then we had to implement, our final set of firewall rules and server resources based on everything that we found out. At the user acceptance testing stage is when we start seeing that public access to that individual ArcGIS server site. System test is completely internal. But once we get to UAT, we do start having that internet accessibility to our internal services. So we had another group of firewall rules that we had to test and get in place. And then finally, like Christine said, we were using ArcGIS Online kind of as our internal portal for some cases. And we wanted to take advantage of those free accounts and the low credit, the no credits, that kind of thing. And the easy sharing that Portal would allow us. So we started migrating ArcGIS Online content that was for internal use only out of ArcGIS Online to Portal for testing purposes. This is our infrastructure for non-production. You'll see Christina flash up these red there it is. So you'll see that footprint of ArcGIS Enterprise deployment in both of those environments. And so that's the commonality here for ArcGIS Enterprise. And you'll see also on the right, far right, and on the far left, you'll see the public ArcGIS server sites. On the right, it's internal only. There's no internet access. It's just there for testing. On the left, it does actually have internet access. So anything we publish to that ArcGIS server site can be fed into ArcGIS Online. It can be accessed by any kind of vendor application or open data deployment that we have coming in the future. Most of it uses token security, so it's not wide open, but if you can handle token security, you can get access to those services. The other pieces that we deployed, that's all right. Other pieces that we deployed, I just want to point out real quick, is that middle piece up at the top. Christine talked about the ability to customize widgets in Geoportal, in Portal, which is different than ArcGIS Online. We did prop up a server there that feeds both environments that allows our developers to create custom widgets and consume them in both environments. final stage, I believe about middle of June.
Hi, this is Shar.
Finally, in about the middle of June, we deployed to production. You'll see the infrastructure on
You've
the right.
reached the Department of Transportation Bureau of Technical Services Environmental Services section. Who exactly are you looking for?
Can anyone else hear that?
Yeah, can we mute her?
I just muted her, so
Thank
hopefully
you.
that worked. I'm sorry if the person who I just muted is offended by my blunt response.
I must have thought we were calling her.
Right.
Anyways, so production deployment happened about middle of June. Our project ran through September. So we deployed production. This is where we wanted to finalize our existing app deployment. We're going to deploy enterprise content for our users in Geoportal. So we have a set of GIS layers that we wanted available to our users when they first hit Geoportal, so that they could start mapping right away. A lot of users that authenticated to the system through Active Directory were automatically added to groups that were tied to Active Directory groups. So there was group membership set up already for them once they hit the system. We finalized our governance. We provided user training for our staff members to use the system. Final migration of production AGO content to production Geoportal, and then any kind of additional testing as needed. And that kind of rounded out how we deployed the infrastructure for Portal. You'll see there's an extra federated server there for the geocoder that we had in our old environment. Otherwise, it's very similar to what we had deployed in non-production, but it's all isolated for itself. So it has its own widget deployment server, it has its own public access server, and then some ancillary servers that we had to upgrade for licensing and file storage and batch processing, that kind of thing, down at the bottom. But I think that's the end of my presentation. I think Tony's going to take over here and give you some idea of some of the techniques and strategies we use to load test and stress test the system.
Hello, everybody. So, yeah, I just want to kind of piggyback on what Adam was talking about there. So we planned and implemented the system, and now what do you do to know if you've scaled it properly? So back in the old days, when you used to develop an application or have a mapping service you'd want to test the load on, you would have to coordinate a bunch of people and get them together and try to monitor the service while they were hitting that. And but you really weren't able to gauge the performance of the service under load or actual, feel what the user was feeling. So now there's a tool called System Test for the Web, developed by Esri. It's a free tool you can download now, and it right on Esri's website. With this tool, you can design load test for map, feature, geocoding, cache services, and other types of things. And you can do this to test your systems. And how is this done? So we can take transaction logs from ArcGIS server for existing map services, and we can kind of scale those out, and we can basically find out how many transactions per second they're experiencing during peak load. So as an example, if there's 6,000 transactions per hour, that's 100 transactions about per minute, 1.67 transactions per second, that's kind of our peak load. Now, if you take that and multiply that by 3, that's basically what we were testing for within our environment. We would design these load tests for map services. You can do it for single or batch testing of services. And again, the batch testing, you can group all these together and you can run a batch file and you can run them all together. For these load tests, you get metrics on the back end, giving you detailed transaction response per second, requests and response per second, passed and failed requests, CPU and memory. And again, this is a great tool, but just a couple caveats with it. The metrics don't work for batch testing. So if you're doing batch testing, you would need to monitor the service directly, look at CPU and RAM, kind of jog those things down. And then also too, ArcGIS server logs would need to be monitored for those batch load tests that you were doing. And again, the documentation, what I found out, it's not very good at all. So if anybody can, I'd love to at some point write a white paper about how to do this and kind of distribute that, because the documentation is not good. Can you go to the next slide? Perfect. And then monitoring the system. So with a system like this, you're going to need to monitor it. You need daily, weekly, monthly monitoring, checking logs, doing server health reports, monthly checks. There are things that we check on a daily basis, including all the production federated or portal, all the servers that have the portal security implemented, and the non-federated servers like that public ArcGIS server that Adam was talking about. Things we check like web adapters, the data store, storage, non-production environments as well. Those things don't need to be monitored on a daily basis, but they still need to be checked. We also have things that DOT itself can trigger for us. If there is 90% of the storage is being used up, we can get triggers and sent to us via email and grow those systems so that we don't run out of space. And of course, account management as well. This system, even though it's only been in place for a little over a month and a half, we have over about 900 users currently in the system. So every time, like Adam was saying, every time a viewer hits content or the homepage, they get a viewer account, which is free. But then we also need to manage the user requests for elevated privileges. But when people are moving on from DOT or they retire, we need to make sure that those accounts get cleaned up, and also any content that they have needs to be archived and properly shared with other people. We are looking currently at ArcGIS Monitor to be used to collect and analyze data on status, usage, availability, and resources for our enterprise GIS portal. But so it's kind of like a one-stop shop for the monitoring of your system. We are in the process of implementing this, but the product seems to be designed by the same person or group as the system test tool. So the documentation definitely needs some help, and it's very much trial and error at this point in time. So I very quickly went over those things, and I'm going to kind of send it back over to Christine, who will focus now on the front end of our system.
Christine, are you muted?
Oh, sorry about that. I was muted. Yeah, we're going to wrap this up really quick. I know we're a few minutes over. We got started a few minutes late, so my apologies. We're not going to be able to get through all the great content that we have prepared for you, but I just wanted to go out mentioning that we put a lot of information out on our SharePoint internal web pages about what Geoportal is and how to get accounts and how to get an account with elevated privileges to do editing and data creation. We do have a new user agreement that we have our licensed accounts that get sent with our licensed accounts. We have information about system requirements, known issues, frequently asked questions. We have a process for sharing content agency-wide that requires maintenance, having a maintenance plan agreement, and certain requirements for all of the content items that are published in Portal. And I think we would be happy if there's any other, if you're thinking about using ArcGIS Enterprise and deploying it at your organization, and if you would like to receive copies of any of our documentation, we would be happy to send those to you. Feel free to reach out to us. But the last thing is I just wanted to mention, that was my cool MC Hammer. That was my cool MC Hammer meme that I'm not going to get to use. But this took dozens of staff at DOT to pull together, including management, other IT support, and also we pulled in a lot of business areas to do consultation and testing for us. And so I just want to thank everybody. And I know we don't really have time for questions, but if you have questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat. Maybe we'll try to answer those during the next presentation.
Thank you, Christine. I do see one from Chris that if you see that, you can respond either via email, or I'll just read it out loud now so that you know it's there. With such a large organization, how do you plan to manage user-published content and service in your enterprise? So you've got that one to work with for sure.
It's a great question, but we have answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.